base flood elevation. So with the drops of the BFEs, and the way that our definition is written, we're kind of decentivizing people to elevate their homes from a resilience standpoint or an insurance standpoint. So right now the city requires to have homes be built to a 2-foot freeboard, but with the max height limit tied to BFE and not the freeboard elevation, this results in discouraging people from building higher than BFE. And just kind of artificially caps people with that 2-foot freeboard because we don't give them any additional height. This also limits parking as a viable option to keep off-street parking for residential structures, and that's the picture that you see after this memo. And Eric and I will kind of explain some stuff, but what we are proposing is instead of having a 2-foot freeboard, we would go to a 4-foot freeboard. This doesn't make up for completely for the overall drop in elevations. We're still at a net 2 to 3 foot loss on our base flood elevations, even with an additional freeboard requirement. So we're not even making up to the 2004 base flood elevations with an increased freeboard. Okay. So with having a higher freeboard, people get more insurance discounts, we get a better CRS rating, but again, it is still lower than what we were used to building for the last 16 years in the 2004 maps. So also, with an additional 4-foot freeboard, we would also propose that the definition for max height requirement be changed to a 34-foot maximum height measured from the top of the bottom living floor. So that would be the floor that you stand on, and that coincides with elevation certificates and how they measure those for flood zones. And so the ratio of 34 feet of heated vertical living space would be consistent with our current regulations. Instead of tying it to base flood elevation, which as we see can change and be detrimental to how people use their homes and their land, it would be tied to that first floor. So if you look at the blue house, this is what we were used to. So this is the 2004 maps with a 2-foot freeboard. And then if we do nothing, we take no action, we would have the greenhouse. So this shows the drop in the base flood elevation with a 2-foot freeboard. So as you can see, you can't use this space underneath for parking or walking under. The only way that people would be elevating higher under current regulations is if they sacrificed max heated square footage. So basically we are, as a city currently, we are prioritizing heated square footage over resilience and elevation of the home. With us trying to be a more resilient city, we're supposed to be looking at 3 foot of sea level rise. This does not support that. So this is 34 feet of max heated square footage. This is our little red house. So what we are proposing is an additional 2 feet of freeboard. So that's our 4-foot freeboard there. That's the minimum requirement. What people could do is elevate as high to our fire code restriction, which is 50 feet from the center line of the road. That's an existing code that we already implement. But all of this space underneath would be pilings and unheated, and would just be used for parking and storage. So this gives people the freedom and flexibility to have the continued heated square footage, but can elevate their homes for either parking or resilience, insurance, savings, whatever they feel. But we would keep the standard regulations for that 34 max heated square footage, which we already do as a city. Do I have any questions? Or
so you're not reducing the size of the house that you can build. You're just saying so that you can still
Right. So that ratio stays the same, and it's basically just a sliding scale. Right. Right now, if people wanted to go higher than this lower BFE, they would be squishing their house. This is stagnant because it's tied to base flood
can still do that, you know, if they want to.
If they want to,
Yeah.
but you're giving them the
But
option
we give the option, we
to.
don't wanna punish people if they wanna elevate and drive under their house and be consistent with what we've been doing for 60 years.
And so max heated square footage would still be applicable, so 3,500, 3,600 square feet. Lot coverage would still stay the same, setbacks would still stay the same, it's just the definition of that max height requirement would be on the top of this bottom living floor instead of a base flood elevation.
We thought too that it's important that the general massing doesn't change, so you're not screwing up the corridors and everything beyond what we already put in there.
Yeah, because we're staying within that same ratio of house. The amount of house that you get isn't changing. So we wanted to float this idea by you guys first before we dove into changing ordinances. The one thing that I did not cover is Folly now actually has shaded X and X zones, which is technically outside of the special flood hazard area. And so we would like our flood ordinance, and that means freeboard requirements, V-zone design certifications, all of that we're used to be applied to all parcels, all structures on the island. This would require some definition changes, and we would work with the state to make sure it's in compliance with FEMA and the FIP. But right now we do have some loopholes.
We have some strange little corridors.
The big bridge that's kind of on Cooper, and those technically are outside of a special flood hazard area.
So all the things that we normally apply now to help us, that have helped us get our TRS rating, like the V-zone construction, design, elevation requirements, in those loophole properties, all of a sudden they wouldn't be bound by that.
Right. And our CRS rating is based on the ratio of the area of SFHA that we apply everything to. So right now, Folly Beach's ratio is a 100 because in the 2004 map, everything was in an AE or VE zone. If we have some of these parcels excluded, it could go down to like an 80 or a 75, depending on how those numbers worked out. So that's something that we would also want to go forward to keep that and to have everyone on the same playing field from an enforcement standpoint for Erica as well.
Well, ultimately for CRS, we don't want to lose everything we gained because we end up with 14 loophole properties on there.
Right.
So we're not gaining anything, we're just maintaining the same.
Correct.
That's the goal.
Yeah. This is how we've been operating for the last 16,
At least 16 years, not
20,
longer.
30 years.
The insurance break for freeboard, doesn't it end at 3?
It ends at 4.
Is it 4?
Yes.
And so if you look at your blue house and greenhouse, the blue house isn't as high as it could be, right? The hard ceiling is 50 feet.
Correct.
So the blue house actually could have gone higher, but there's no way under the new rules that the greenhouse could go any higher than the hard ceiling of 50.
After we do the changes we're talking about.
Right.
That's what we're asking for. Right now, we have more than a few houses out here that are sitting between 45, 47 feet, you know, under the current regulations. So it's a restriction that has existed for a long time. At 50.
Well, I remember when we changed to freeboard last time, we made an exception so that the roofs wouldn't have to be squashed.
Right.
And this just kind of reflects.
It's doing the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not tied to DFE. We kind of want to get away from being tied to DFE changes because this might happen again in 10 years or 15, or we don't know. They might go up again, back down again. This way, all this stuff will keep working regardless of what DFE does. The elevation of the island, the land is probably not going to change much unless we have an earthquake or a hurricane.
Right.
Magnitude.
But sea levels will rise, flooding will increase. So we want to stay ahead of that with our building inventory going forward.
Does this change incent property owners to build taller?
This doesn't incentivize anyone, no. Because the minimum that we're requiring is still 3 feet lower than what we were used to requiring. There's no incentive for going any higher besides insurance premiums. Right. Just gives people the opportunity to drive under their house and park
So instead of a traditional garage space, we could see a trend toward boat storage, which requires a larger berth or double-decker car type arrangements in those garages, lifts, things of that nature. The only reason I asked about height is the taller a house gets, the more wind shear it has, and that to me is less of a resilience practice.
You can do that right now. You can build your house higher as long as you stay underneath that hard pan of 50 feet.
50 feet.
So you can only build a 1-story house, but you can build it 24 feet in the air if you want to.
Right. So that's what's probably limiting the amount of.
That's what's limiting the height of the houses now.
So when we remove that limitation, are we potentially inclined to see our houses get taller on Folly?
We didn't remove that.
No,
There's
the
still a
50
50-foot height.
foot is still there and
Correct.
has been there
Right.
and will not
So
change.
said differently, take full advantage of the 50 feet. So right now, few people are going to take full advantage of the 50 feet.
Right now, you have a bunch of these, right around between 45 and 47, so in theory, if everything, if the math works out, you could.
But what they're saying is you can't increase the square footage. It's still 3,600 feet. 3,600 feet is 3,600 feet.
Right.
And
So,
then
so you
16
can't
foot,
make it any bigger than what you're doing now.
16-foot pilings still have to be B-zone engineered and withstand wind zone designs and scour and everything, so it takes a lot more engineering. So that's actually decentivizing people to go too tall because you're having a story and a half on pilings, which is an engineering marvel.
Right. Yeah, I like that outcome
Yes.
as opposed to more people building taller.
Right.
The nice thing about tying it to the grade of the road actually is, as the road changes on the island, your streetscape stays, it's all relative, you know, when the roads, as the road elevation goes down, your panorama's gonna go down.
All right, any other questions? Comments?
Okay, so we'll hopefully have,
This really helps me.
yeah,
I thought the red house.
we tried, yeah, our arts and crafts project over here. Okay, so we'll try to move forward with getting first draft of ordinance reading for the March 10th.
And you know, if anybody's curious, we get the numbers together for you, see how many properties fall into that weird X zone.
Yeah, we have that
Yeah.
spreadsheet from Sean, so we should be able to figure that out.
We can provide that.
Oh, now, so it's on the okay,
Thank you.
so the, council committee for commercial activity on the beach met. And we decided, since our recommendation is, since it's so long since we met, and we had a plethora of new people wanting to put more stuff on the beach, that we just said, we're gonna freeze it where it was in 2020. That isn't penalizing anybody that was here in 2020. It's just not letting any new people come in 2021. Gives us more time to look at it going forward. And so that's our recommendation to council. Just stay right where we were, and if somebody gives up a slot, we don't fill it. It's just empty. Don't put anybody else in there. That way we don't have to worry about somebody hollering, oh, you wasn't fair. You give him a slot, not me a slot in 2021, when I wasn't there in 2020.
I think one good thing to add to that is the businesses that we were getting requests from were more yoga and more surf camps, which step on the toes of our current beach franchises. We said we just looked at them all at the same time. If we need to up the number of franchises, that's fine. We can't continue to take more of the same thing.
And one more thing to add, the reason we recommend carrying over from 2020 is that the businesses who were here in 2020 did not generate complaints, or they weren't, they have a proven track record, so we're not just applying them because they were here. They were here and they were also good businesses and good stewards of their areas.
And it's still kind of to be determined in 2022 if there's gonna be any more added or to stay at the same number. Like, that's still what you all, the committee will
This
discuss.
just gives you
and
more
say
time
what
to
is-
work on it.
Right, okay.
And hopefully for the folks on the beach, it kind of stays the same. I mean, we kind of filled the beach up with businesses already, but still, right now. All right. Any more questions? You still got 10 minutes.